Hi there, it's Cassie. Welcome back to my YouTube channel and blog. Today is part 2 of my 2-part series of 10 cards, 1 kit using the My Monthly Hero April 2018 kit. Part 1 came out yesterday, which was cards 1 through 5, and today we'll have cards 6 through 10. So for card number 6, I started with a small strip of Neenah Solar White cardstock, and I stamped the pepper image all over using Lawn Fawn jet black ink. It's Copic friendly, and so is the paper, because I plan on coloring those little peppers with my Copic markers. They're just so darn cute. It has this sentiment that goes with it that says, "You're one hot mama." So I'm going to absolutely be using that sentiment on this particular card. So after I get done, I color all of those, and then I'm going to grab my Finetec Pearlescent watercolors in the red. And so I add some water to it, and then I put it on the end of a stamp block so that I can splatter that and add the splatters to the peppers and another white panel. And then I'll dry that with my heat gun and adhere the pepper strip to my card base. And I'm going to pop up the white panel. After I'm done adhering that, I'm going to pop up the white panel with some foam tape and adhere that to the base as well. I thought it would be fun to have those peppers peeking out of the side. And then that strip will be have a little bit of dimension. So this is a simple card, but you know, just by adding a little bit of dimension, you can really change the card. And here's where I screwed up. So I've already adhered that panel down with foam tape. And so I thought, well, I want to stamp the sentiment on the front, so I'm going to put it in my MISTI in case it doesn't stamp correctly. So I put the sentiment in there, and I wanted to be crisp and dark, so I used VersaFine Onyx black ink, and oh, as you can see, it wouldn't stamp. So I'm pushing even harder, but where it won't stamp is right in between the foam tape. So it didn't work out. So I'm going to stamp it on a piece of cardstock, and then I'm going to paint that with that same, I'm going to paint the happy sentiment after I've got it dried. I'm going to paint that with that same Finetec Pearlescent watercolor in red. So I'll add a little bit more water to it and just use a stamp brush after I get that mixed up good and well. And then, you know, since I'm not using a lot of water, it's mostly pigment that I'm using. It's not a big deal to paint right on this cardstock, but typically this Neenah Solar cardstock is not what you would want to grab to do any sort of watercoloring. Because it'll cause the paper to pill, it'll buckle, it won't be good. So I just did it like that, and then I heat it with my heat tool, and as you can see, it's kind of shiny. That's why I like those pearlescents. And then when I'm done with that, then I'll adhere that to the front and use once I open it up, I want to put that hot mama sentiment on the inside, and I notice there's an ink smudge, so I use my sand eraser to kind of get rid of that. And I'll put the card base back in my MISTI, because after all that work, I want to make sure that that image or the sentiment stamps good and clean. So I've lined it up, probably not perfectly, and I'll stamp it down with that Lawn Fawn jet black ink again. And then that's going to finish off card number 6. So moving on to card number 7, I want to use all 3 of those beautiful mulberry papers. And so let me just tell you, I started making cards 7 through 10. It was, by the time I finally got out of bed, because I knew I wasn't going back to sleep, it was 4 in the morning that I started these. And I got to tell you, maybe it worked for me, because the ideas were a hoppin' and a poppin' at this point. As you can see, I have my tea off to the side there, and I think that by this point is cup number 2. So like I said, I wanted to use all 3 of those beautiful mulberry papers, and my idea was to cover the base, like the whole thing, with all 3 of the different papers. But I don't want the fringe on them, because the idea, like I said, goal was a piñata, and but I didn't want the fringe like a piñata normally has. I wanted those beautiful fibers to just shine. So I'm tearing them like I did before with water, and I did that twice before in part number 1 if you watched part number 1. If not, you should really head back and check it out. So I do that with all 3 of those, and I kind of give a pretty jagged, you know, look with my paintbrush, and just tear along that line, because it just A couple of you have mentioned how you like the mulberry paper as well. I'm not the only one, and it was fun. So I went ahead and I put my adhesive directly on my card base, and I started hearing the papers, being sure to overlap them because I did want them to overlap. I didn't want it to, like a piñata does. And I'll just keep going back and forth because I thought that I had enough there, thinking, okay, this is good. We'll just do 2 of each color. And I was really liking how that was turning out. Trimmed off one of those extra fibers because it looked like a bit much. And then once I get them all adhered, I'm going to trim all the excess. And the scissors I'm using are really great scissors. They're the Tim Holtz scissors. Those things are nice. I don't know why I waited so long to get some. They cut through that like butter. And it's at this point that I decided that I wanted to add one more strip of the green to the top because I thought there was just too much white showing through that. And I just adhere that and again trim off the excess. And now I'm going to stamp that piñata image and my sentiment with some Copic friendly ink because I'm going to color my piñata really simply off camera. And then I cut some little flag banners into the edge of that sentiment. And I also cut out a circle, as you could see, and I'm going to adhere that circle with some liquid glue. And then I'm going to add foam tape to my piñata and my sentiment, and I'm going to pop those up with the foam tape. And then when that's done, that's going to finish off card number 7. For card number 8, I wanted to do some scene building, so I'm going to work on sponging a sunset with the 3 ink colors that came in the kit. So it's going to go about 4 times faster than normal. I don't ink that quickly, but I wanted to, like I said, I wanted to work on a sunset image there, and so I started out there with that Fiesta yellow, and I'm bringing in the Fiesta red now because I want to combine those two to get a little bit of an orange. And I made it 4 times fast because sponging can be quite a bit of a process. So all I'm doing is working back and forth in a circular motion, just going over the top of those. I'm sort of layering them a bit and just going back over them to get a good blend. And now I'm bringing in the Fiesta teal over the top of that Fiesta red, and I'm really liking the pink that is the purple that is coming from the 2 of those colors combined. It just adds such a pretty look. And yeah, so from there I'm going to take some water and I'm just going to spritz that over the top a couple times, let it sit for a second or so, and then sop that up. And now we're back to just 2 times as fast. I used a Scenic Safari die from My Favorite Things on some Nina Desert Storm cardstock to create those mountains. And now I'm just, to give them texture, I'm spritzing them with a couple spritzes of water, and I'm dabbing up the excess, and then I'm going to crumple those mountains. Now, we live in El Paso, pretty much right next to the Franklin Mountains, and I will tell you, the sunsets here are unlike any other. They are gorgeous, and when that comes over the mountains like that, oh, it's a sight. So I've been really inspired by where we live currently, and we won't live here forever, but I'm enjoying it while we do. We've lived in a lot of beautiful places. I would say that pretty much everywhere we've lived, there has been something beautiful, and El Paso is no different. And this set just was so fitting for where we live currently right now. I can use these cards to give to a lot of my friends. They're wonderful. Anyway, now moving back on to making that texture pop on those mountains. What I did is I used some gathered twigs with my sponge dauber, or my mini inks blending tool, and I'm just kind of brushing that over the top, just lightly, to add texture to the paper as well. It'll make them pop. And so now I'm going to adhere those mountains with some liquid glue over the top, and look at that. It's starting to come together. It's quite a scene. And I just love the texture that it adds, and like I said, this one really reminds me of where we live. Thankfully, we haven't really seen any snakes. I know they're out there, but we haven't seen them. And off camera, I stamped and colored 1 snake and 3 cactus, and now I'm just cutting those out with my Sizzix Sidekick. And I'm going to adhere that desert scene to my Nina Desert Storm card base with some liquid glue, and then I'm going to put an acrylic block on top until it dries. It's just fitting that it's Nina Desert Storm, and it's a desert scene. I'm really liking how it's turning out. So I'm going to put some foam tape on my snake and adhere him. And then I'm going to use some liquid glue to adhere 2 of those cactus into the background. I'm going to kind of tuck them in. And then I'm going to use foam tape for the front cactus. I want those 2 back cactus to look like they're in the background. And then the 1 cactus is going to be sitting in front. For a sentiment for this card, I decided on Fiesta Time, and so I rubbed the top right corner with my anti-static powder bag, and I'm going to stamp my sentiment in Versamark ink, and I'm going to cover it with some white detail embossing powder, and then melt that with my heat tool. I've said it before, I could watch embossing powder melt all day. It just pops against that night sky now. I like that. And so then I'm also going to stamp a sentiment on the inside. And once I'm done stamping that, that is going to finish off card number 8. We're moving along. For card number 9, I'm going to build another scene, and I am actually going to start with the Hero Arts Starry Night Brushstroke Bold Prints background stamp, and my stamp platform is going to be great for this. So I've actually taken my Nina Desert Storm panel and I've temporarily adhered it to my stamp platform, and I'm using the Fiesta Yellow ink. It's a tiny little cube, but that's a big ink pad, so it took a while, or a big stamp, so it took a while to ink up that background. And as you can see, the stamp platform is fantastic for things like this because it shows, or it allows me to restamp where I need to. Or as I said before, I was up at 4 a.m. for this card, or for all these cards here at the end, and so I'm snacking, and the ideas were a-flowing. So here I'm going to do something different. I'm going to try to make a wood floor with my Copics. So I've masked off the upper part of my card with Post-it tape, and I've grabbed my E87 and my E89 because of the perspective there. Actually, because of the perspective there, we are going to be going at it from an angle, as you could tell. So you're going to start in the middle and you're going to go angular with the Copics. And I'm just kind of going back and forth, no real rhyme or reason other than I'm trying to make it look like a wooden floor. And then I'll go back over that to kind of blend it out, because otherwise it's a little bit harsh. And in order to clean my mat, normally you'd take like an alcohol wipe, but I don't have any of those. So I use my colorless ink blender refill, just a little dab of it, and a dry baby wipe, and that cleaned it up. And then I'm going to clean up the line on my scene with my E87, because you can tell it's a little bit bumpy there. And so I'll just take it and I'll just kind of straighten it out a little bit. And once that's how I want it, I'm going to grab my little Misty tool and I'm going to stamp out both the mice from this set. I don't show you that or the coloring, but I do that. I take both mice, color them out, and then I tape the matching dies in place, and I'm going to run those through my Sidekick here in a second. And if you watched part 1, you're going to recognize something here in a second. So I'm trying to build my scene, and I grabbed those 3 cactus from part 1. Those were a mess up. I had screwed up on part 9 and put foam tape on the back of those when I wanted to actually put them on the inside of my card, but they already had foam tape and it would have ruined them to try to take the foam tape off. So I'm just going to kind of see how I want to build my scene. And after I figure out where I want the scene or how I want the scene to look, I just grab some Tombow Mono Multi and I tape or glue my panel down to my card base. And I'm going to put an acrylic block on top of that just to kind of keep it in place. And now I'll adhere all those cactus to my panel. And once those are where I want them, I'm going to adhere my little boy mouse, my little mariachi mouse. He's too darn cute. And I'm going to adhere him in the background. And on my female mouse there, my little dancer, I've actually doubled up her foam tape. I want her to look like she is in the very front of the card, so she's at the forefront. And then I stamp my sentiment on a small white piece of cardstock, and I'll adhere that to my panel, and I'll cut off the excess. And that's going to finish off card number 9. For my final card in this series, I'm going to use several different Distress Oxide inks to stamp a background. So I'm going to use some Wilted Violet, some Picked Raspberry, Wild Honey, Spiced Marmalade, and Cracked Pistachio. Those are all the colors that you see there. And I just thought it would be kind of fun to just do up my own background using some of those flower images and some of the flourishes and just covering that background. Those Distress Oxides stamp so nicely that I just thought it would be fun to make a background with them. So I'll work my way through each of those colors. And I've finished off my snack by this time, so I have no more M&Ms to eat. Yes, I know, eating M&Ms at 4 or 5 in the morning, probably not the best choice, but it kept me fueled, along with, I think, 3 glasses of tea. But I survived, and I think these were some of my better cards. So who knows? Maybe I'll just have to get up at 3 in the morning most days when I have some stamping to do, and who knows what creativity will pour out of me at that point. So there's the spiced marmalade. And when I'm done with that, then I'll grab the cracked pistachio and one of the flourishes. There weren't any leaves in the set, but I thought it would be kind of fun to use that flourish, kind of like it's a leaf. And I'm just filling in the little gaps. All over. And then I'm going to move on to using that ornate floral border die that you'll see here in a second. And I use that along with some Stampin' Up! Concord Crush cardstock. I don't know if they make that color anymore. It's just one of my favorite purples. And I run that through my Big Shot. Now, I didn't need my metal shim, but I did put an extra piece of cardstock on top just for a little extra added pressure. Now, everybody's machine's a little bit different. It all depends on your rollers, so you just may have to try it out. I trimmed my background down to fit behind the border, and then I used some liquid glue to adhere that to my panel, and I did that as well with my border. 2 different kinds of glue, but one just has a little bit more of a precision tip. Then I stamped the banner in black and my sentiment in the picked raspberry. And then I'm going to hit that with my heat tool when I'm done stamping, because I want to make sure it's good and dry before I run it through my Sidekick with the matching die. Many thanks. Many thanks for sticking through these videos. This one's definitely a longer one. And so I'll trim that down, hit it with the heat tool. And while I was running that through my little sidekick, I decided to run some more of that Concord Crush through as well. I didn't want my banner to just get lost on that background because it's white and so is the background. So I added that to the background like a shadow. And I used some liquid glue to adhere that, and then stamped the panel, or adhered that to the purple panel and adhered that as well. And that'll finish off all 10 cards. So let's take a look at the last cards. There's card number 6. There's card number 7. There's card number 8. There's card number 9. And there's card number 10. And that's that. So if you liked these, I hope you stop by and see part 1 if you liked this one, because I think you'll like part 1 as well. And if you liked these, go ahead and hit the like button below and subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss out on anything. And as always, thank you so much for stopping by.